Thank you so much, Jorge, and also Candy in programming as well, and Carrie in the tech booth. If all is going smoothly, you can hear my voice loud and clear right now. Is that correct, folks at the back? Okay. Wonderful. Now that that's finished, I get to introduce Erin Chan. Now, I'm going to let you in on a little secret. Erin Chan and I have known one another since 2007. Knowing someone for that long and admiring someone for that long means that Erin is going to get the over-emotional gas-up bio rather than the bio that exists on his professional website. Are you ready?
I guess
As ready as you can, because I'm doing it anyways. So like I said, I met Erin in 2007. Way back then, I was a mentor, and Erin was a participant at YouthCo, which is a youth-led HIV and Hep C organization that seeks to reduce stigma across British Columbia using peer education. Erin in particular was a co-lead on something called Project Stitch, which invited youth to propose their own solutions around communicating sexual health and wellness using digital media. So Project Stitch, as far as I know, was Erin's start in an ongoing practice of exploring the intersections between storytelling and social justice. And this is something that reading Erin's bio on his website, even though it is a very well articulated bio, won't reveal. So we could Google, for example, Erin's laurels and discover that as early as 2009, he began writing, producing, directing, and editing short films. Films like On the Bus, Cured, and Anniversary saw their premiere at the Vancouver Queer Film Festival before going on to screen at scores of independent film festivals around the world. But what Google doesn't tell you is that after premiere screenings at the Vancouver Queer Film Festival, he then joined the programming committee of the Vancouver Queer Film Festival, volunteering his time and his growing expertise to uplift LGBTQ emerging filmmakers. So really recognizing Erin's practice of social justice storytelling and volunteerism is part of recognizing his artistic vision. Over the years, I've seen Erin be a feature reader or a musician at countless fundraisers and community events. He is always ready to roll up his sleeves and join his community in whatever is needed. The more he published in literary magazines such as Rice Paper, Extra, Filling Station, QWERTY, Subterrane, by the way, winning Subterrane's Lush Triumphant Award, the more he invested in BIPOC, trans, and queer community arts. So the history of mixing art and activism definitely paved the way for his debut memoir, This City is a Minefield, published in 2019. I'm so glad all of you are here. As you can imagine, any book that came out in 2019 or early 2020 didn't see many live audiences, so it's really great to be in person with you all to celebrate this book. It's a generous gift to us all. Of this memoir, award-winning author Kai-Ting Tom said, "In crisp, spare prose, Chan strikes familiar notes in the Asian diasporic narrative while adding his own distinct counterpoint meditations to the meaning of purpose, desire, and beauty. This is a lasting contribution to the growing canon of Asian queer literature, a must-read for all of us who have struggled to know the meaning of home." Please welcome Erin Chan. So let's start with a question. I'll ask it slowly. I know it's a lot to take in. When, you write your bios and you write grants and all that other stuff you do as an artist, but it's still kind of hard to take a compliment, isn't it?
It feels like you just made a speech for my Lifetime Achievement Award. That's the weird part for me.
I mean, I would consider your memoir in a way a Lifetime Achievement Award investment. Prior to The City is a Minefield, you had worked in a decade or more, by my watch, in identity-based and very personally driven art, whether it's been music, film, or creative writing. You had a growing body of work that was all leading you to this memoir. But knowing how talented and how cross-disciplinary you are, why memoir? Why memoir specifically? What did a book-length memoir allow you to express that perhaps your other projects prior had not?
Right. So I started writing memoir when I took a creative nonfiction class at Langara in 2009. And I don't know what it was about it, but it just kind of felt like creative writing, specifically creative nonfiction, had no bounds. It can be so many, it can be whatever you want it to be. And that sense of freedom felt like, oh, finally, I can say all the things that I wanted to say. And all these stories just kind of poured out of me. Like I had been waiting for so long just to I don't know, regurgitate them. And even though I had at that point been, writing music and starting to make films at that point, I didn't feel like those are very specific mediums with very specific set of expectations and boundaries that I think for my own purposes of like narrative didn't fit 100%. So then coming across creative nonfiction and memoir was like, oh, this is the form that I think I really want in order to tell all my stories. One thing about going back to how flexible memoir is that I think people have a certain idea of how, I think a lot of people don't realize how flexible it is, that they hear memoir and they're like, oh, it's your life story from like A to Z. And actually that's not really, like it could be that's totally valid. But I remember the first kind of like experimental piece I wrote was when I was a student at UBC with Andreas Schroeder, who's like fantastic instructor, and he was like the first class, he was like, okay, so like we're talking about memoir, and like it's almost always written in first person, and like rarely in second person. And immediately I was like, oh, I want to try and write something in second person. So I did, and it eventually became a chapter in the book called The Birth and Death of You and Me. And I realized then that like you can do it, like anyone can do it, and you can write anything that is true to you and call it creative nonfiction or memoir or whatever, and that's so awesome about it. For me, so for all of those reasons, it felt like writing, and also I think, so at music and at film at their core, like there's writing involved, right? And you can't, but I think the thing about those two is that you can kind of fake it. You can kind of fake the. You can
fake it, but yes, go on.
The writing sometimes takes a back seat for music sometimes, and for film. Like you can have like sparkly production and the lyrics take a back seat. You can have like good acting and good cinematography, but maybe the writing's not that great. But when it's writing, it's the writing. You can't hide anywhere. The audience, the readers will know. And I think that vulnerability of people being like, of me telling my story and telling my truth and then have nothing to hide behind and them picking up every word is like really what I wanted. Yeah.
Would you read some of your memoir for us today?
I would love to.
Excellent.
I'm just going to grab my book because I may need to. Okay, so I'm going to try to do this without looking at the book, even though I just grabbed it. So this is a chapter in the book called Between Channels. The first gay person I see dies in front of my eyes. It's 8 p.m. and it is the 90s. And if you were alive in that time and you were Chinese, that means it is time for another episode of A Kindred Spirit, also known as Dancing. A Kindred Spirit, for those who don't know, is a family drama and is one of the longest running Chinese television shows of all time. I giggle as my 9-year-old feet sprint for the center spot on the dark green leather couch of my living room, so I can claim it before either of my sisters. And my family files in after me. They're all smiles, We get settled in and we turn the TV on to the Chinese television network in Vancouver, Fairchild TV. But this episode tonight is different from the dozens, the hundreds of episodes that we have watched so far, because this is the episode where we meet Gary and Jackie, a gay Chinese couple. When I see them, I stare fixatedly at them, like I am trying to study and learn about everything that they do and say, as if this family drama has become a documentary on the life of a gay person, and they are this exotic animal species, never been seen before. I can almost hear David Attenborough's narration in the background somewhere. I hold my breath as I watch Jackie break up with Gary, telling him that he is no longer gay and that he is dating a woman named Rebecca. At the end of the episode, my family chit-chats about what happened, and I throw in a few half-hearted remarks, but don't join in as I usually would. This goes on for the next few days. I no longer shriek in excitement before the episode starts. Instead, I observe Gary trying and failing to talk to Jackie, who wants nothing to do with him anymore. And afterwards, I mumble a few comments, but never say the word gay. It will be nearly a decade before I'm physically able to say that word. Before the final episode of their story airs, my family is super excited. Gay Gary, my sister shouts as she races past me and takes the center spot on the couch. My family laughs at my sister's joke. I do not. I shuffle over in a daze. I feel apprehensive about Gary's fate, since things have not been going well for him. On screen, he tells Jackie that he wants to meet one last time at what was once their shared apartment. The camera lingers on various objects in their house before ultimately landing on a photo frame of the two of them, their arms holding each other in a loving embrace. Then the camera cuts to Jackie arriving and their inevitable quarrel. Jackie has changed, but Gary won't let him go that easily. Gary takes out a big kitchen knife that reminds me of the one we keep in our kitchen drawer, and he stabs Jackie in the stomach, a violent action that renders him momentarily horrified and distracted. Jackie seizes the moment to somehow manage all of his strength and push Gary out the window of their apartment, where he falls and dies several stories below. Jackie goes on to recover from his knife wound and marry Rebecca. Presumably they live happily ever after as the show continues on, featuring other characters and other stories. When the theme music plays, the cheesy saxophone music over the end credits, I gape at the screen. My family talks about how Jackie was right to kill his aggressor, that Gary deserved it. I don't say anything. I shuffle over to the bathroom and get ready for bed. And when I'm crawling into bed that night, I distinctly remember thinking to myself, well, I'm never going to come out to my parents now. Yeah. Spoiler alert, I did. But yeah.
Thank you. And off book. Nicely done.
Thank you.
I saw you read that at the Junction, 1181. One of those clubs downtown. It was like us reading our sad stories and then drag queens like in between.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
That was a good event. I love it when they just mix creative writers and with drag queens. Like, in no way can we compete, but you know, we do we do our best. Thank you so much for that reading. So that is first person, and like very much sort of like a slice of life or an anecdotal narrative. But there's other things in this collection that are a bit more lyrically complex. In particular, the lyrical essay or the personal essay. I find the essay quite a beast to write, but it is a really rigorous form. A lot of us are attracted to it. Writers of color, in particular, queer authors as well, seem to really be giving the essay and memoir quite a moment, quite an ongoing moment of like rigor. How did you feel writing the more essaic or the more lyrical essay parts of your memoir, and what drew you to it in the first place?
What drew it to me in the first place was it just felt like an extension of everything that I wanted to say. I think of essay as a plot of land that is yours, and everyone has this plot of land. It has their own plot of land, and you can build whatever you want on it. It is a safe space for you to do whatever you want. You can build a house, you could build a tower, you can build a tiny little closet. But the essay, I find, is like, so I would say this is like a house in which I will show you the different rooms, and different rooms have different stories to them. I felt the need to just be very open and vulnerable about everything. So when I wrote it, I constructed this house, filled the rooms with things, and then whether or not when you build anything on this plot of land, you don't have to share it. That's the great thing about essay, is that it is yours. An invitation to enter that house or that space or that plot of land, whatever you choose to build on it, is an invitation that signals empathy and understanding. A reader should go into reading a memoir or a book of essays with an open mind. And for me, that invitation is like, opening the door and being like, okay, you can come in, you can read all my thoughts, you can poke around, you can look at these skeletons and dead bodies in the closet of all the things that I'm not proud of. You can watch my parents fighting, and other things. But I think that's the great thing about essays is that I feel like that invitation, like declaring it as an essay, signals to readers that, I'm going to tell you some really honest stuff. You don't have to read it. You don't have to come in and read it. But if you do, you have to go into this, with understanding, with empathy, with patience. And when you come out of it, hopefully something will have changed in you. That you going in with empathy and understanding will further create a feedback loop of more understanding and empathy for you to, disperse into the world. And I think for me, I don't know if I was exactly conscious of this whole process, but to write essays is to change people's minds in a very subtle way. And I think for diverse, BIPOC, queer people, that we've struggled to be understood for so long. And the publishing industry there was a big barrier in telling those stories for a very long time. And things are changing now, but it took a long time and progress was slow. But when we started telling our stories, I think that really felt like it was validating, that people read our stuff and said, oh, I understand now. And we, the ability to change people's minds and for them to understand how we feel, what we feel, and why we feel what we feel and think, I think is so valuable. Because, I mean, we could just write a textbook, but that's not really, that's a different way of understanding rather than like sharing an essay or writing your thoughts on a topic. So yeah, I think for me, just what's great about it is I want to change people's minds.
Yeah.
I want to make the world a better place, and make people, I don't know, understand. Yeah.
Yeah, the essay's great for that. It is very subtly persuasive without it being like a Wikipedia page or like a how to be an ally kind of BuzzFeed list or something like that. Yeah, and can I ask that when you're talking about using the second person, so the you, was that in one of the more essaic parts of your memoir?
I consider that piece memoir rather than essay.
Okay.
I think other people might consider it as an essay, but to me, there's like, an arc to that.
It's
one.
blurry, by the way. Anyone
Yeah.
who's had to work with me as a student before know that some of these genres get a little bit blurry. But I find using the second person is also like a very queer approach to literature, like this idea of like talking to ourselves or talking to a younger version of ourselves. It's just like utterly a queer art form. Maybe most popularized in like RuPaul's Drag Race, where the final contestants are shown pictures of themselves and are like, so Reggie, what would you say to your 4-year-old self? Like there is this thing of having to catch up with oneself because our own perhaps origin stories, like the one that you just read about watching Gay Gary on TV, our own origin stories can be sometimes so fraught. So that idea of like having to be in conversation with ourselves as well as with our readers just feels very queer literatures to me. And I did notice some POV switches in the book as well, and some other experimentation. So did it, how long are we talking when we're talking about writing this book? Like some of these pieces feel very distinct or different from each other. So were they written far apart, or was it more that you just wanted to try different experiments and that's why they're very distinct from each other?
I started writing this, so I think, let me not go back there. So I think sometimes when people ask me, like, how long did it take you to write this? Like, I did not wake up one day and be like, I want to write a book. Like, the first piece I wrote for this collection, I wrote as a student at Langara in 2009, but I didn't think about writing a book then. I just wrote a piece. And then it was really only after taking Andreas's class that that class was so good.
I almost failed his class.
Oh no!
I couldn't write an essay. He just was
no.
like, you haven't got it, and I'm like, okay, I'll keep trying. Yeah.
I'm sorry.
No, we don't. It takes some of us longer than others. Okay, Aaron.
But did you still have a good time?
You don't need to take care of me.
Okay. Well, I had a good time.
Yes, good.
And after that class, I was so inspired by him that I was like, I'm gonna write a book, and it's gonna be a memoir. And so, I think the last piece I wrote was after graduation in 2014 or 2015. So I mean, that's like a 5-6 year gap, and I do think that my writing, like, you can see the change in writing styles and the growth, I think. But I also think that it was, like, I wouldn't have it any other way. I know that, like, my book is flawed and it's imperfect and it's not, like, the highest thing of literature. No, like, no, I mean, it is what it is. It's this thing that I'm super proud that it even exists because I tried a very long time to get it published afterwards.
Yeah.
So it has been a journey for sure.
Yeah. And we don't just get to only write one memoir. Like we get to return to nonfiction again and again, which is great. I love nonfiction as just a testament of who we were and what we could express at the time, which I think this does do an ultimate job of that kind of expression. Time and place are actually very integral to this book. It has a lot of only in Vancouver kind of stories to it. Like, this could only happen in Vancouver. It's very much something that will invite readers to reflect on the city that we're living in. Just thinking about your readers and your readers' take on Vancouver, like what do you hope that they notice most about the city, or maybe even question about living in, these very shared communities that come together and make Vancouver?
I hope people recognize that I wanted to really give a sense, because I think a lot of queer lit that's coming out these days are like taking place in big American cities, right? Mm-hmm. And I was like, what about Vancouver? Mm-hmm. Vancouver, and like that's the thing. So I specifically wanted to ground it in Vancouver, because like I lived here all my life, and I think that like Vancouverites have a right to tell their own stories as well, and to, in a way, at least try to mythologize Vancouver as a more than just the ocean and mountains and rain, the way that everyone thinks it is. That it is also full of flaws and imperfections, and we all have different experiences growing. Like, I think the idea of Vancouver is very much like removed from the people, and I wanted to tell a story specifically about what it is like, what it was like, I guess, growing up in Vancouver in the 90s and the 2000s, from a queer Asian perspective. I wanted to do all of those things. I really hoped that I wanted to write a book that I wish I could have read when I was younger, because I was in high school in the 2000s, in the aughts, and I was like, I know I'm gay. I've known since I was a child, and there was just like very little, if anything, out there. And I think that's one of the reasons why I wanted to write a memoir as my first book, was because there was such an absence of those stories out there in those, back then, but also still now, that I knew that other people out there would be able to identify with it, and also just, I don't know, Vancouverites deserve to read about other Vancouverites, right?
Yeah, well, you've had this book now out for almost 3 years.
Yeah.
It just feels like no time. Like the last 2 years were not real years. So it really, to me, this book came out like last pub season. But yes, the reality is that it's almost 3 years old now. So you've probably had a lot of Vancouver readers read it. And you've also had all that time for readers. Readers love to give feedback on Memoir, just FYI. How many of you are maybe working on Memoir yourselves? Okay, then you're great. None of you are in the hot seat. But when you write a memoir, you tend to get a lot of audience feedback, like a lot of questions, a lot of reflections. How has the reader responses been so far? And then maybe to think about this being a very Vancouver book, like particularly from other Vancouverites.
It has been it's been received very well. I got a lot of really positive messages from strangers, I guess. Mostly online because things were happening, and I got messages from people on Reddit and social media, just thanking me for sharing my stories, because like there was one person who said that they couldn't put it down, and they it had never affected them reading anything else before, and that they were very, very thankful for that, or for reading it. And honestly, that's kind of why I continue writing, is for people like them who need their experiences validated, because it's such a powerful feeling, and like also specifically like actually like a surprising number of other like queer Asian people in Vancouver who have messaged me and told me things, nice things. Yeah, very nice. Yeah.
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me. That has been, some of the feedback has come from other queer and Asian readers. I feel like books find their way to the exact readers that perhaps might need them most, or like at least we hope our books find their way to those readers specifically. Yeah. So I have a couple more questions, and I am going to turn over questions to the audience. So if you are starting to consider whether you would ask a question, now is the time to start to articulate it in your mind. So sort of piggybacking off of that, no surprise here, but you've perhaps brought some Asian writers into the audience to see you tonight, some members of the LGBTQ community, some emerging writers in the room here. So I'd kind of be remiss to not ask you to share some of your wisdom. You've had, a 5-year journey in writing this particular memoir, and then also its own journey in finding a publisher and launching the book. So, what are sort of your top 3 things that you would advise to emerging writers, and especially cutie BIPOC writers?
Number 1, do it. Just write. I know everyone tells you this. And all writers, your professors will tell you just to write, but honestly, you just have to do it. If you are a writer, you just have to do it. I need to take that advice. I have not written for a while. But also think about, like, if that doesn't motivate you, which I don't blame you, then I think just thinking about, like, why are you writing this, Because people want to hear your stories and to know your truths. Those positive messages that I got, like, they could very easily, you could get all of those as well. And it's makes it all worth it in the end, I think. Number 2, have people in your corner, people that you trust, family and friends, good family and friends, people who you can trust for good feedback, who won't just lie to you, or who won't be very brutal or harsh about feedback to you. Find a good writing, like some writing friends or writing buddies, where you can share your work with and who can give you feedback. That also includes not listening to your parents if they're really mean, like mine were. But also, if your parents are supportive, I guess I can't even imagine what that is like. So just listen to supportive people, I guess. And then number 3, I would say, it's gonna be really, really hard. Writing is hard, but also publishing is harder. In my experience, I don't know about your experience, but like, publishing is super tough, and there will be days when you feel like giving up. And maybe after your first rejection, you will feel like giving up. Maybe after your 10th, or in my case, the 35th rejection, I almost gave up. But you just gotta keep going, and remind yourself again, like, why are you doing this? And know that your stories are valid, and that the world is waiting for them. So, just be persistent. Because if I can do it, any of you can do it.
Publishing is hard. It absolutely is its own type of journey that we're often not prepared for. I had this impression with publishing that once I had a handful of publications, that I'd just be a shoo-in every single time. Like, I'd be like, all right, I've proven myself. I'm ready now to just have everything I write published, or, all my future books will probably go to the same publisher. But it's not that way. Like, rejection happens at any point in our career, whether you're emerging or mid-career or even established. I had this editor that I loved everything she did. Her and I had a great collegial relationship. We both liked each other's work. And she pitched something to me. She's like, do you want to write something for this? And I said, yes, like it's my dream. And I had like 4 books by that time. Wrote it, and she rejected it. It was like failing Andrea Schroeder's class all over again. Edited it, wrote it. She's like, no. And at the end, she's like, your voice is just not what this magazine is looking for. And I was like,
Oh.
So it can. A rejection is just utterly part of it, no matter where you are in your career. I don't mean to put the fear back into you, because I know you really went through hot fire, to get this published. But just, again, for writers out there, it is this bit of a roller coaster ride when it comes to publishing and promoting, like also, as you know very well, you do have to have some skills in personal promotion to get your book into readers' hands. Did you do a lot of the like sort of PR marketing for this book as well?
Yeah, I kind of had to because the publisher that eventually published my book is like the super tiny press in Hong Kong of all places, because all the Canadian ones said no. And so I mean, they were like the tiniest bit connected to like the Canadian literature scene, but it was basically me contacting publications and press and bookstores to be like, hey, I'm a writer. I wrote a thing. Do you want to do things with this thing? And me trying to do my best on social media and things like that. So yeah, it was hard.
Yeah.
Because no one, I mean, I don't have a background in marketing. I didn't really know what I was doing. I still don't really know what I'm doing. But
tweet things and hope people like it.
Kind of,
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. The library's social media for this book looked great, and I loved the posing with the two photos. If anyone follows VPL on Instagram, their Instagram is amazing, and they often do some really innovative stuff with book covers as well. And they did such a great job with yours, Erin. It looks amazing. All right, I have one final question for you before we start to turn it over. So speaking of Twitter, I do read your Twitter. I follow you on Twitter, and I'm one of your friends who likes all your posts. But I noticed that you said tonight, because this memoir has been out for a while, and it, often books get a year. Yours has gotten a few years now of life, but this might be kind of like your send-off for this memoir before you move on to some next projects. So this is kind of a two-parter. What would you like to say to the city as a minefield to send it off in in a way that honors it and all the work that you've done together?
Hello, my baby.
Yeah.
Hello, my darling. I mean, this thing has been with me since 2009. It's been a really long time. And there are days when I wake up and I'm like, oh my God, I wrote and published a book. What the fuck? Because I would never have imagined that I would get this far in my writing career. I didn't even know that. I just thought me with everyone else, writers, like published authors. So I never thought I could get to that level. But it's been many, many nights, many days of just sitting at the kitchen table hammering it out while my mom cooks food around me and scowls and tells me who's gonna even buy your book? But I'm so glad this thing exists, is out there in the world, and I know that it'll continue to find people, and people will continue to find it. And I'm thrilled that it is making a difference for people. So I will always love and cherish this as my first child. Yeah.
I will too.
Aww,
I want to be its godmother, okay?
Okay.
Okay, great. And then that leads me to the second part. Do you want to tell us a little bit about what's next for you and your creative journey?
Sure.
Okay.
So I don't know if I'm allowed to say this, but I'm going to say it anyways. And because no one has told me not to say it. So, and I've also told other people already. So, if I get in trouble, just not. I don't know. I wrote a children's picture book when I was in university at UBC, and it is going to be published by an imprint of Penguin Random House in 2 years, in 2024. So that's super exciting.
This is when we clap. This is actually a huge deal. Yeah, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
Do you want to sneak peek us like a title or like who the protagonist is in that child's book?
Sure, I can tell you.
Okay.
Why not? It's called The Broken Heart because I want to depress children now. And it is about a little girl named Stephanie whose brother recently got his heart broken, and the pieces of his heart have flown away to different places around town that were once special to him and has now ex, but he is too depressed to get off the couch and put those pieces back together.
Oh.
So she takes it upon herself to go and find the pieces of his heart and put it back together for him.
Oh, that sounds wonderful.
Yeah.
And do you know who your illustrator will be?
The illustrator is a local illustrator. I think she lives in North Van, Josiane Vlitos. Yeah, she's great.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's so wonderful. Congratulations, that's such a huge deal.
Yeah.
Yay.
Also, never in my wildest dreams did I think that was going to happen. So that's happening, and then I am currently working on a second book of essays, a kind of a follow-up to this. And then also, I guess, lastly, I will be starting my grad studies, doing my MFA in creative writing at the University of California, Riverside. So I'm finally getting away from Vancouver after all this time. And that's going to be a big change because if anyone has read my book, I have never moved or lived anywhere else besides Vancouver. But I'm really excited about where things will go.
Yay. Also, congratulations on getting into a very competitive MFA program. We could clap again. Like, that's just... And so for all of us that are stuck back here in Vancouver and are not following you to sunny California, how should we stay in touch with you? How do you like your readers to keep in touch? Like, are you mainly Twitter person? Do you want to give us the URL of your website as well?
Sure. My website is theaaronchan.com because I'm the Aaron Chan. My Twitter handle is also the Aaron Chan. That's where I am mostly active. And then occasionally I will post shirtless photos on my Instagram
Yeah.
at Aaron Chan Van.
That's where you go for the thirst traps.
Yeah.
Is there literature, Twitter, thirst traps,
Yep.
Instagram, as it goes.
That's all you need. That's marketing, right?
Yeah, that's marketing. Yes, absolutely, absolutely. So you know marketing better than you originally thought. Yeah.
Okay.
Are there any questions from the audience? This is the time to hand it over to any of you. If you've read the book and you have very specific questions, go ahead and go for it. As you can see, Aaron is very willing to get vulnerable and also very articulate about craft. Or if you just have a writer's life type of question, what an expert and a gem we have with us today. Anyone in the audience have a question or is perhaps formulating a question? Yeah, hey, thanks.
Hello, Tina.
I am about 3/4 of the way through your book, to be honest, but there's a part maybe halfway through where you have some correspondence emails with your aunt.
Mm.
And my question is, do you have a lot of, like, did you have to, like, go through a bunch of correspondence? Like, you have these emails. Like, I don't have, I just feel like I deleted everything from when I was a teenager. So I thought that was kind of an interesting, like, that feels like you're not even relying on memory at all to write. It's like exactly what
Right. Yeah, I mean, I kept things like that when I was younger. I kept a journal when I was younger, and surprisingly, I still had those emails. Yeah, there wasn't that much to go through in terms of like emails and correspondence and things like that. But it was, I mean, I think I didn't have to trim that much for those emails. It just tidied up things here and there. Because eventually, like at the end of those emails, we started talking about other things, so cut that out. But yeah.
How did you decide, because when we talk about like levels of getting personal, levels of like vulnerability, an archival material like an email is really, it was really gosh down personal, right? Because it was originally intended as one kind of correspondence. So how did you decide, you know, how to weave it into the book, and also maybe like ethically or like personally, how did you decide to use email as a part of the narrative?
So that chapter, the chapter in which I have emails and other things like that, is a chapter called All the Ways to Say I'm Gay, which is all about the different ways that I've come out since I was 7. And I decided to include those emails because that was the first time I said, told an adult, like, that I was gay, and that I confided in someone. And that was like, personally for me, it was a huge, huge step, and I was very, very, what's the word, nervous about it, because I didn't know how she would react, or she would tell my mom, or she would tell my dad. So I think that email was like very formative, and I couldn't not leave it out of a chapter where I came out to people. How did I ethically include it? I actually haven't told her that I included it. I talked to my editor about it, and he was like, I mean, it happened along, like, she didn't say anything that was like really personal or like too like private, and if so, like, we obviously would have cut that out. It was about, at the core of the emails, it was about this, like, the struggle to tell her what was going on, and this crush I had on this guy. So I don't know, maybe I'm just like too vulnerable, and I'm like, anything goes.
Yeah.
But yeah, to me, it's just no question.
It's interesting, your original metaphor for memoir as being like kind of this like fertile plot of land where you can build literally anything. And, you know, including epistolary or archival material and memoirs as absolutely approach I'm seeing more and more frequently now. But, you know, which is wonderful. Anything does go, absolutely, if the artists, if any of us as artists want to. But family seems to be like, you know, a real wall for a lot of us, because, you know, maybe like that ex from 6 years ago, you can kind of like obscure who it is exactly, but we only have one family. So there's literally nothing to hide behind when you're writing memoir about family. So I was just curious a little bit about the process, about writing about them, including emails and all the other, you know, all the other anecdotal stories. We only have one mom, like you can't pretend it's someone else after the book comes out. So yeah, and I think that, I don't know if you've gotten this question, but as a queer author and an author that's had sort of other stigmatized identities, I always get asked, like, does your mom know? Has your mom read the book? Does your mom still talk to you? To which I'm always like, unless I write a book called My Mom Is Still Talking to Me, don't ask me a question about my mother. Like, I'd never want to hear about it. But you really went for it. Like, family is like kind of one of the pillars of this memoir. So yeah, I was very curious when that question about the aunt's emails got asked, like sort of what was your process, and basically giving yourself permission to just go for it with family.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm glad you did. I mean, it's so important. Family is so complex, you know, and for all of us that are even considering writing about our families, like, again, The City is a Minefield is such a testament to not only the complexity of family, but how an artist might push through that and actually write those stories. So yeah, thank you. I know we have time for one more question for sure. Yeah, Ayoko, please.
So you talked about how you want your readers to change when you read your story. But was there any way that you changed through writing your story, yourself or your perspective?
That's a great question. I'm kind of jealous I didn't ask that myself.
Was there a way in which I changed while writing it? Yeah, I think so. I think I had to be. I'm just trying to think back because it's been quite a while since I wrote it. I think when you write a story, when you're writing a memoir piece, and you're going through the details of what happened, you are kind of, in a way, like looking at it from at a certain remove. And for me, I think I felt like, yep, I did those things, and yep, I didn't learn. So I think it honestly forced me to it was kind of like therapy in the sense that like, I was like, oh, I am noticing patterns about myself. I should probably like work on that or do something differently. In one of the chapters, the super, well, they're all gay, but like the super gay one where I'm coming out to everyone, while I was writing that chapter, I was still coming out to people, obviously, because coming out is a lifelong process. And the last chapter is like how I came out in my 20s up till now. And one of the anecdotes is how I struggled to come out to like a stranger one time when she asked me about the book that I was writing. And then I reflected on that because then I wrote about it and I was like, oh, why am I doing that? Like, that's so weird. I'm writing this like very, very gay book and I can't even tell this stranger about my book and to be honest with her. And that actually made me realize like, screw it. I should just like, why am I doing that? I don't need to do that. It's, I've been out since I was like, arguably out since I was 7. Like I shouldn't be hesitating or reluctant to tell people about myself. And that had an effect on me and now I'm just like gay. So it's, I think that helped when I was writing, that introspection made me realize that. And I don't know if I would have been able to change that if I hadn't written that chapter.
I have my students read one of the pieces that you wrote for Extra. I
What?
think you titled the piece Silence, but in Extra they had like a longer, fancier title. But it's basically 2 anecdotal stories, and one is homophobic comments from a teacher in high school. And the experience of not being able to respond to that in real time, per se. And then another one was hearing homophobic comments while riding a bus and actually being able to intervene and say like, hey, those comments aren't okay. Do you know the piece that I'm talking
Yes.
about? Some of you know the piece we're talking about. Yeah, okay. So, and I do think that it is like our ability to self-identify and also like just to even talk about anything that is queer in the public sphere is still tenuous. Like, I applaud you and I'm glad you went on that journey, but I also think the world can be an unsafe place.
Yeah.
I was flying home from New York once where I won an emerging lesbian author award. And I don't know why I started talking to myself, to a stranger on the plane. Don't talk to strangers on a plane. Just don't do it. Like, just listen to them talk about their kids or whatever. Don't talk about yourself. But I did it. She's like, what brought you to New York? And I was like, I won an award. She's like, for what? Oh, for a book I wrote. She's like, what's the book about? And I was like, I don't want to tell her.
Yeah.
I don't, because if she hates me, then I have to sit on this plane for like the next 4 hours with her. I do think that the journey of queer artists who are using identity to express ourselves is the most important journey, and hopefully the only journey, but actually other people are going on their own journey, and sometimes that journey is hateful. So it's not all on you, is really what I want to say. It's not entirely on you to come out to strangers, It's also up to all of us to continue to change the world so that coming out to a stranger is no longer
Scary.
Like an act of tenacity. It's just something that's an everyday thing. Yeah. Well, we got this book, so that'll help equip us to change things. And we could squeeze one more question in. Yeah, Jonathan.
Publish it. What gave you the courage to, stand
So after I took that creative, back to Andreas's course,
Yeah.
I was like, I have a clear plan. I'm going to write a book. I'm going to get it published. And then I wrote the book, and then I was like, okay, time to go and start sending it out to publishers and agents and anyone I can. Is the root of your question like you about vulnerability and being like I wrote about my family and they could very easily be like upset at me? Is that what you're going for? Okay. I didn't think about that honestly, and I was too set on getting this thing published, and also I didn't care what my family would think. I don't think I said anything bad about them. So I felt like they didn't have cause to be upset at me, because number one, I didn't talk about them that much, and also number two, I didn't think I said anything like bad, so therefore I didn't think that they would have a problem with it. I also, I told my mom definitely for sure I was writing a book, and I don't think she cared. I just didn't think about. I didn't think that they would care. I didn't, and if they did, then I would just talk to them about it. Like I had read stories of like people getting in trouble for exposing family secrets, and I was like, I'm not doing that. Like, it's just first, it's not about them. It's about me. So it was, I didn't care.
And you were ready to get published too. Like,
Yeah.
When that drive hits, sometimes there's like nothing really stopping us. Like I hope that all of us who are creative in some way, if you have something you're very passionate about, you just keep pushing through with it. Which is what you did, and like the tail end, the publishing part is bumpy. So again, thanks for your tenacity. I'm really glad that you found that small independent publisher in Hong Kong. That is incredible.
Yeah.
And that the book is also still so easy to find here. If you do go to theerinchan.com, Erin has a very comprehensive list of hyperlinks where you can order the book, and also local independent bookstores that carry the book. VPL, of course, you can get on the wait list to sign it out. I think there's a bit of a wait list to sign it out right now, but absolutely you can borrow it from your local library.
Sorry, I also have some copies with me today if anyone wants a copy.
Oh, marketing, good job.
Yes.
So if you'd like to purchase a copy today and perhaps have Erin sign your book or say hi to him after the event, that would be wonderful. We can definitely stick around and mingle, say hi to Erin if you want to, for a little bit longer.